Hi, this is SportsReplays here. This is another AFL prediction video coming out. So we'll start off with 18th, and that's Richmond. I think it's pretty obvious the reason why. A lot of good players have left, and they've got a lot of young talent in, and I just can't really see them winning too many matches. They did have quite a lot of injuries last year as well, but they're probably better than a 2-win season last season. But yeah, again, I just can't see them winning too many matches. They might get 1 or 2 wins, but other than that, I can't really see them winning more than 3 matches. I could be wrong though. And then at 17, we've got West Coast. Again, another they got a good few young players coming through, but they still heavily rely on their top end players. It's sort of urging, like McGovern. If he get injured, they're sort of screwed in the back line. They've lost Barras, and they have recruited a few other players from other teams, but yeah, they've still got a long way to go until they show me some improvement. Still reckon they're a significant better side than Richmond, and they show that in the practice match. I know it's only a practice match, but just they still they don't particularly perform that well away over the last few seasons. They might get a few decent home wins, and I can see that like they did last season, like against Melbourne and Fremantle, which were two couple good wins. And then at 16th, we've got North Melbourne. Now I could be wrong about this one. I'm not quite as confident with this one because North Melbourne actually brought in some decent older players in, as well as they've got those new up and coming players coming through. So this could bite me in the arse, but I still reckon since there was a large gap last season between the bottom 3 sides compared to the rest of the competition. They're still, they're closing the gap a little bit, but there's still, a few wins behind that, main pack of other sides. So I still reckon, they're like a couple wins away from that middle pack. But they're a lot closer this season. I reckon they will be. They'll get about 7 or 8 wins, maybe 6 to 8 wins at a percentage of around 80%. Still a lot better than last season. That's all you can really want as a North Melbourne fan. You'd be happy with that. But yeah, look, they're not going to really, challenge the top sides. And then St Kilda at 15, and the reason is look, this one is probably going the most wrong potentially. They got a lot of injuries earlier on, and I just can't see them, really getting off to a good start. They started off slow last season. I mean, did have a decent win against Collingwood, but other than that, they did struggle early on. They did get a few decent wins later on this season, like beating Sydney, and had a few nice wins. But they're still a bit inconsistent, and they just don't really have that spark or sort of, that player can really take them to the next level like most other teams. And the 4 line isn't really that great, and they've lost a few defenders as well. Lost battle. Could I be wrong? Yes. If some of the players do come back in earlier than expected, they could surprise a few sides. They just need Max King and Sinclair fit, and some of the other players to step up a bit more. Some of the younger players. Who knows? But yeah, they're still a fair bit better than North Melbourne, and they've shown that last year. But I'm not quite confident with this selection either. And at 14, we've got Adelaide. Again, this one's probably going to be wrong, but out of the sides above them, I just think, every other side above them probably has shown a little bit more or has that potential, at least recently anyway, to show them a threat of finals. Adelaide did have a few good wins last season, a few upsets towards the end of the season. I think they did beat Port Adelaide as well once last season. But I just don't think they're, quite ready yet for finals. I could be wrong. They almost made it a few seasons ago and probably should have. So if I do go back to that form, I just think they're still reliant too much on Taylor Walker for that season. They need other players like Rochelle and some of the younger players to step up instead of relying on Dawson, Rankin. Rankin can go to the next level. He has that potential. It just needs to sort out the inconsistent performances. And he was a bit more consistent when he did play last season, but none of these silly suspensions or anything like that. And they might even, they could potentially challenge for finals. Like I said, I think St Kilda and up, all those sides can potentially make the finals. And then at 13, we've got Melbourne. Now again, this one can bite me in the ass as well. Not quite confident with this one. Because Melbourne can show signs of being a top four side at times. Like they beat Geelong last season. They came close against Carlton as well. One of their matches. So they have shown to be up there. Also beat Port Adelaide away early in the season. So they can still challenge the top sides on their day. It's just, as you saw in the second half of the season, they're just really falling away to where they were, early in the season, and for at least the last few years. So I reckon they just need all their players fit and firing. They need Oliver and Petrarca fit to win it. They need Gawn, being fit. And they need a few other players to step up. I mean, they still have, May, Lever. They're good players. They're starting to get a bit older. I just think some of their bottom players just aren't quite ready for AFL level yet, and they need them to step it up. It's mainly their forward line. They do have Pickett and Fritsch, who are decent, but and they see that good key forward as well as some of the other forwards just to chip in a little bit more and have more options down there. If Petrarca and Oliver dominate. And then on to 12th is Essendon, my team. Now this one. Maybe some people do think we can finish bottom four, or some people a bit more bullish and may challenge for the 8. I'm sort of in between. It's a bit of a tough round this area of the ladder because it's always a logjam. There's always this, who knows what. So it's really like a roll of the dice. I just think this season we're sort of, got rid of Stringer, which may hurt for this season, but I think going forward it's probably a longer term option. And I can see why some people might be frustrated. But at least you're going to, challenge for finals or challenge for a top 4 or win the flag. There's no point having, players like Stringer who are aging, who don't necessarily have the best personality, who aren't that professional. We need someone who wants to be there, who isn't as greedy, who, applies that more pressure. And the problem with Stringer is he's just, he's not the most fittest athlete. And he's a bit of a defensive liability. He's good attacking, he can score your goals and a couple of decent goals, but he just does silly things. I think he missed 3 behinds against the Gold Coast game, which we should have won by about 3 or 4 goals. So again, I'm not quite confident, this season, but there is potential there. Even in the practice match there, we did win by a few goals, but again, both sides did rest their top players. So it's hard to take, from these practice games. I guess it's good to see what your young players can do. I'm just concerned with players like, Peter Wright. Is he finished? Who knows? It's not looking good. I think last season, we had, I think, the 3rd most inside 50s, but, we didn't have the 3rd highest score. We weren't near that. So this year we can improve the efficiency inside 50 as well as just, that defensive pressure and locking the ball in a bit more, making it harder for the teams to get out. We can make the top 8. We did show that a few times last season, but we just didn't show it enough. I think GWS, that game, we were able to lock GWS out and able to, take over in the second half and really had it struggle for GWS to score. We needed to show that more on a consistent basis. I don't necessarily think it was a huge problem with the forward line as much as what other people were saying. We do have forward line options down there, but we just left the ball out too quickly. So defensive forward pressure, something we need to work on. And I guess once Ridley and if Reid can get backing up, fit and firing, defence be a bit more stronger, but I still think it's another weakness as well that we need to focus on. But I can see us making the 8 if we don't have any injuries and everything works well. But again, we could finish bottom 4, but if things don't go our way, some people think we do. I'm just going to go in the middle. I'm a bit more bullish than some people. I just think we can't just fall bottom 4 once we only lost that one player, Stringer and Heppel. I mean, Heppel was in and out of the side, and Stringer wasn't. He was good, but he wasn't that great player like we recruited him for. So look, 12 for us. And then Port Adelaide, at 11. And this one again could bite me in the ass. It could potentially be the most incorrect, but Port Adelaide with announcement of Josh Carr going forward next year. Don't know why they did that before the season start. You don't. I can see why they're doing it halfway through this season. If your coaches are performing poorly, you're doing halfway through this season. Port Adelaide's actually made the prelim last year, and they've been making the 8 consistently. They've only missed out a few times in the last 5 years or last 6-7 years. So I'm not too sure what they're doing there. It just sort of demotivates the players a little bit. It sort of makes as a player, you think, well, what's going on here? Why are you doing it now at the start of the season when you made a prelim final last year? It just baffles me, that decision there. Look, this could be wrong. They have a good midfield. I just think their forward line and defence just isn't up to it. And I'm not too sure. They didn't really make any improvements, so I just don't think they haven't brought players in like some of the other teams around them. They haven't made as many changes as what I reckon they could have done. And who knows, with Port Adelaide, they can probably still make the 8, but I just think some of the other sides above them a little bit more, not necessarily reliable, but a little bit more easier to get a read of. And they didn't change their coach, right at the start of the season. And number 10, Gold Coast. Now, this one could bite me a little bit, but I'm probably a bit more confident with this, just simply because Gold Coast just haven't really shown me enough. They've never made the 8 at all. I think the only team that hasn't made the 8 in the last 10 years. So they've just never really been there. They've been okay the last few seasons, but it's time for them to take the next step. Will they do it? They said improve their away wins, really. That's what stopped them from getting the 8 last season. They got to win those away matches, particularly against North Melbourne. They got to win them. So, look, I reckon they can, make the 8. Yes, I reckon they've got a good enough list. They've got great midfielders with Anderson, Matt Rowell, some of the top midfielders there. Half decent defence. I guess where Gold Coast struggled with last season was their forward line. I just don't think their small forwards are good enough. They're probably actually worse than my side, Essendon. I actually think we do have a better forward line than Gold Coast. I know Gold Coast have Ben King, but other than that, who do they have down there? And that's the problem with Gold Coast that not many people are talking about. That's Gold Coast's problem. They need to improve their small forwards, because if King has a bad day, who's going to score all their goals? They'll do a few good young small forwards coming through. We'll just have to wait and see with them. But that's probably the position where I'm concerned most about, Gold Coast. And that's where they really should target through the trade period. And then we've got Western Bulldogs, number 9. Again, this one could bite me in the ass, but that's where Bulldogs are really finished the last. Other than that year when they made the grand final, they've finished around about then the last few seasons. They just made the finals last year due to a few sides falling off. So, their best is as good as any other team, but as you've seen, their worst could be pretty bad. And that's what sort of bothers me. They've also lost a few players, even though they're on the fringes. So their depth probably won't be quite as strong this season. But they do a good few players coming through, like Ugelhagen and Darcy especially. I think Sanders might even get more of a go as well. It's just their bottom half players is what I'm really concerned about with the Bulldogs. Look, I could be wrong about them. They can make the finals, maybe even top 4 if things go off. I can see that happening with the Bulldogs. They can surprise us and win a flag. Do think they have that potential. Do think they can still win the flag. That might be a bit too bullish, but it's unlikely compared to the other sides above them. Then at number 8, a bit of a controversial one again. Hawthorn at number 8. Now, I'm not as optimistic. I don't like Hawthorn at all. I can't stand them, but it's just, people putting them at, think they're going to win the Premiership when they haven't even made the prelim final. They haven't really shown any, they haven't made that prelim final step next. And they had a bit of luck they might have 1 or 2 players, I think, injured, but they had a lot of luck towards the finals with not as many players getting injured. I mean, Brisbane still won the flag with 2 players injured, Colton for the whole season and McInerney for the grand final. So I just think they're still a little bit behind a few of the top sides. I'd like to see them again do it for another season, make finals and make this a prelim final if they're going to show any threat. I just think, what evidence does them make in the Premiership? I mean, the other sides that are a bit closer to them have got more of a complete list than them. So I reckon that's just, a bit bullish on them. I reckon it's a bit ridiculous, to be honest. Now, look, they're going to have a tougher draw too, and you've got the other side trying to figure them out. We'll just have to wait and see. I just think last year, it wasn't necessarily a fluke, but, they caught a lot of teams off guard. A lot of teams weren't focusing on them, and they played North Melbourne and Richmond twice. And that's 4 easy wins there. It's, you're going to win those games, 9 times out of 10. So, I mean, look, who knows? I could be wrong about this. They can make the top 4, but to win the flag is outrageous, in my opinion. That's probably one of the most ridiculous opinions I've seen this season. They just don't have a good enough, key forwards to win it. You got Chol, who keeps changing clubs all the time. Make up your mind, Chol. And then you've got, who's our other key, forwards? They do have good small forwards, half forwards. And they have improved in their defence as well. Maybe they're small defenders they could improve a little bit more on as well. But who knows? I just think a lot of people overhyping this team when they haven't even made a prelim final yet. If they did make that prelim final, I made it to the limit, then I can see that. But until then, it's like you can't go from mid-road straight to winning a flag. I mean, it has happened, but it's unlikely. It is a bit more of a closer season, or even competition. So there's no one clear side that's better than everyone. And then we'll go to 7th is Sydney, and the reason is, I mean, they finished off the season poorly, even though they made the grand final. They were lucky to be there. Probably shouldn't have won against GWS. They'll be lucky to do that. If Feeney wasn't playing, they probably wouldn't have won that game. And I just think, the way they finished the grand final. I mean, usually when a team loses the grand final like that, they will either start the season poorly or they sometimes even miss the 8, as you've seen in recent years. Look, they could still make the 8. They do have a good top end. I just think some of their weaker players just didn't quite stand up towards the end of last season when needed. It's a bit of a tough read with Sydney because they made the grand final a few seasons ago. Then they were lucky to make it other season to make the finals, and then they barely made it, and then they made it the grand final this year. So it's a hit or miss with Sydney. I can see them making the top 4, maybe at best, but it's going to be a bit of a tough read with Sydney. And then you've got Collingwood here, number 6. Again, this one is a bit of a hit or miss. They have brought in Houston, but again, it's an ageing list. So I'm not quite confident. They did miss the finals last season, but they had a few injuries. Their depth got exposed and had a few poor matches for about a month or 2. That sort of destroyed their season. Do I reckon they're good enough to make the top 4? Yes. I just think if they get a couple of injuries, and since they're some of the players, they are getting older, there's no real improvement from them. And they only just won the flag a few seasons ago. They'll be lucky to win it, to be honest. They could have easily lost any of those finals. Look, do I reckon they could still make the top 4? Yes, but I also reckon they could finish as low as potentially, 12th as well if they have, a few injury problems. I just don't think their depth as strong as some of the other sides, and their VFL team isn't as good as some of the other sides around them, which is a bit of a concern. And then at 5th, we've got Carlton. Again, this is another tough team to predict. It really is, because they had a good start to the season, and they made a prelim final a few seasons ago. But again, like last season, similar pattern to Collingwood, they had a poor, season patch. That sort of destroyed their season, and they did make finals, but they had to first Brisbane away, which is one of the tougher teams to play away, one of the toughest road trips. Yeah, and they're down by 10 goals at half time. So they're lucky to be there, Carlton. There's probably a few other sides that probably deserved it more than them. I can think of one that we're going to talk about in a minute. Their top players are good. I just don't think their bottom players are good enough to win the Premiership. And that's Carlton's biggest problem. If they lose a few key players like Curnow, they're sort of screwed a little bit, and you'd struggle without him. It's too reliant on their top players. You had teams, West Coast 2018 won it without, without Gaff and Ignachnui, two of the better players. You need a bit more of an even list, and I just think Carlton rely on too much. All their top players, because if Cripps and Walsh get injured, or Curnow, or even Mackay, or Wiedering, who else to have to replace them? Because I think their VFL team again struggled last season. So who knows? I'm going fifth. I'm not particularly that confident either. Don't trust Carlton, but they're not quite as old as Collingwood. So number 4, Fremantle. I just think they were unlucky last season. They could have even made a top 4 last season, but they lost the last few matches, and the one against Essendon against us hurt. They should have won that game against us. They were up by 4 goals and lost it in the last quarter, due to a poor 10-minute patch, which sort of, pretty much sort of ended their season. And losing a game against Port at the end of the season as well at home was disappointing. I think they lost against Hawthorn in a close game. If they won that game, that could potentially, could have been, had a final. I think that, I do believe in Freo. They're not particularly that old either. So I can see them going to be improving from last year. I'm quite confident with Freo. Can they win the flag? I mean, they haven't really won a prelim final, so it's hard to see it. But look, I can see them making top 4. I just don't know about winning it. They didn't make the prelim final to really show some confidence in doing that. But I can see it in an even competition. Because it's sort of at the end of the day, it does require a bit of luck with injuries and being fit at the right time. And I just think Freo sort of fallen off the cliff a little bit at the wrong time of the year. And number 3, Geelong, which again, Geelong always seem to be up there. I think they've only missed the finals twice in the last 20 years. Maybe 2 to 3 times they missed out. A few seasons ago they did, but they had a good percentage. I just think they are still a fairly old team as well. Dangerfield and a few of the other players are starting to get a bit older. They need probably a few of the younger players to step up and take over, which some of them have, like Max Holmes. I'm just concerned though with Geelong is their best as good as what it used to be? Probably not. But they have brought in Smith, so will that shake up a few things? Who knows with Geelong? They always find a way to make up there. Do I think they're as good as their 2022 side or when they won those flags 10, 15 years ago? No, I don't think that. Will they still be up there? I do think yes, because Malion's system, not necessarily talent. There are a few sides I do think have better talent, but I just think a system alone, you couldn't write them off. But again, I can still see them falling off down the ladder because they did have a poor patch last season. So I mean, again, this one not 100% confident. It's just based on recent history, and system really. And then at number 2, we'll go with Brisbane. And the reason is they won the flag last season. I do reckon they will start off slow again this season, but they'll probably finish strong again. They are getting a bit older, so it's going to be difficult to maintain that. And to win back-to-back flag, it's going to be tough. They did make back-to-back grand finals. They could have potentially been back-to-back premiers, but it's going to be tough to win again. They were a bit lucky last season. Winning that GWS game, they probably didn't deserve to win that after being 44 points down, and you had an injury to Caniglio, so probably lucky to win that. But again, it was a good game. They won the grand final by 10 goals in the end, and it was like, it's a bit of a surprise of how much they won it by. They haven't really, I can't really see too much improvement from them. And they won that flag now, so the hunger wasn't quite, as there it was from last season. Missing out in that grand final by a few points, is always, it always hurts, probably more than any other match. So they had that hunger. I'm not too sure if they're going to replicate that, but who knows? They could do it, and they have the potential to do so. And then GWS, look, they're probably the unluckiest team the last few seasons. They made the prelim in 2023, and only lost it, I think, by a point against Collingwood. They're very unlucky. Should have won that game. They were up by 3 goals and ended up losing it. I know it was against Collingwood, ended up winning the flag, but if you got to be winning when you're a few goals up. You got to win from there in a low-scoring game as well. And they lost the 2 finals last year, which they should have won both of them, particularly one against Brisbane from being in winning positions and then losing the game. So, look, I do think they're there. They brought in Drake Stringer, so that might improve their forward line. It takes the pressure off Hogan and Green and a few of the other forwards. So, look, I can see them, making it and win the flag. I just think they've got that hunger compared to some of the other sides around them. Because I think, Brisbane, Geelong have won a premiership recently, as well as Collingwood. And I just think they have that hunger, and it's sort of their last grasp with the players they have. I think this year might be their last year, or one of the final few years for them to have the shot at winning the flag. And I think it's their year. They probably have the most motivation than any other team to win it. They want to back the Giants this season to win the flag. Maybe a Brisbane GWS grand final with GWS winning it by a couple goals. That's my bold prediction. Leave a comment if you disagree, or if you agree with me.